Here's a look at a recap of your markets on this Friday, the 30th day of January. Of course, the semi-annual cattle inventory report was released this afternoon. When we look at everything as a whole for the nation, all cows and calves, that number was expected to be at 99.7% of a year ago levels, and it came in just a touch below that at 99.6%. When we look at the number of cows that have calved on the beef side, that number was expected to be 100.4 and actually came in below year-ago levels at 98.9. There was some talk about the dairy cows that have calved because of all of the impact that the dairy on beef calves have on feeding right now. That number came in just a touch above expectations. The expectations were 101.1 and it came in at 101.9. Of course, the most anticipated number of the report was heifers intended for replacements. On the beef side, we were expecting that number to be 101.7, and it came in at 100.8. When we look at the numbers for the state of Missouri, beef cows that have calved was down 3.2% for the year. Beef heifers intended for replacements was down 3.9%. Those numbers nationwide for the whole means that the calf crop is now at the lowest level it's been in 75 years. Negotiated feedlot trade developed late this morning at much higher levels than last week. As of the 2 o'clock cutoff time, 64,669 head were turned in. Texas turned in 2,862 head from 238 to 241. Kansas turned in 6,141 head. Live sales at 238 to 240.50. Dress sales at 375 to 378. Nebraska turned in 20,409 head. Live sales from 235 to 241. Dress sales at 370 to 378.50. Iowa turned in 24,893 head of negotiated sales. Live sales were reported from 235.5 to 241. The dress sales at 370 to 378. Most of the trade this week was at the higher end of those price ranges. Box beef cutout values closed the week slightly lower. Choice was down $3.36 for the week at $365.56. Select was down 45 cents for the week at $361.94. That Choice Select spread setting at $3.62. Because of the extreme cold and the snow that fell over last weekend, very few feeder cattle auctions anywhere in the state this week. Hardly anything to report on that end. There are several sales that moved from this week to next week, and a few of the early listings looking like next week should be a fairly decent volume week. Taking a look at the futures markets, all of the financials today were just an absolute disaster, led by the sell-off of gold and silver futures. That impacted the stock market as well as ag commodities as well. For the week, February live cattle were 95 cents higher, others 12 to $1.12 lower. Lean hogs were 20 cents to $1.10 lower. Feeder cattle, the nearby March, was up a dime for the week. Other contracts, 48 cents to $1.27 lower. For the day, February live cattle did gain 35 cents. That was the only green anywhere in the complex, closing the week at 235.85. April was down 47 at 236.80. June at 231.72, down $1.55. Feeder cattle March down 4.85 for the day at 360.27. April at 358.27, down 4.95, and May 355.12, down 4.85. Lean hogs for February 45 cents lower, 87.25. April 95.15, down 30, and May 98.92, down 37. Turning our attention to the grain markets at the elevators around the state on Friday, corn bids were mixed, 2 lower to 1 higher. Beans were 7 to 18 lower, wheat down 3. Corn in the St. Louis region, 458 to 462, Kansas City at 433. Soybean bids in the St. Louis region, 1094 to 1095. Kansas City 1029 to 1049. Wheat bids in St. Louis 521 to 538. Kansas City at 501. On the Board of Trade, for the week, soybeans were 3 to 4 cents lower. Wheat was 2 to 8 higher. Corn was 1 to 3 lower, except for clear out December of this year, and it was a penny higher. Kansas City wheat was up 2 to 5 cents. Soybean meal 3.50 to 6.30 lower. For the day, corn for March 2.5 lower, 4.28 1/4. May at 4.35 3/4, down 3 1/4. July at 4.42, down 3 3/4. Soybeans for March down 8 cents, 10.64 1/4. May down 8 3/4, 10.77. July at 10.90 1/2, down 9 1/4. March wheat was down 3.5 cents on the day at 5.38. May down 4 1/4, 5.46. July 5.55 3/4, down a nickel. March soybean meal closed down $2.40 at 293.60, and soybean oil for March down 52 cents a hundredweight at 53.12. With the Missouri Department of Agriculture, that's a recap of your markets for Friday. This is Tony Hancock.